Hello and welcome to the next tutorial for the ultimate turn-based battle system for Unity. In this video we are going to take a look at the Affinities tab inside the custom ultimate turn-based battle system window. Affinities are another important foundation of the battle system because they define the different damage types, elements, or attack categories that heroes, enemies, skills, and items can work with. If stats define the values of a character, affinities define how a character reacts to different kinds of damage. The Affinities tab contains the global affinity list for the battle system. This means that the affinities you define here become available automatically when creating heroes and enemies. For example, the default affinity list contains physical, fire, ice, electric, wind, and light. These affinities can then be assigned to skills and items. Heroes and enemies can also define how they react to each affinity. For example, a fire monster could absorb fire, be weak to ice, resist physical attacks, and react normally to wind or lightning. A ghost enemy could block physical attacks, be weak to light, and resist dark, if you add those affinity types to your project. The Affinities tab is where you define the available damage types or elements. The actual reaction to those affinities is configured later on heroes and enemies. Each affinity can be combined with a resistance type. The default resistance types are normal, weak, resist, block, repel, and absorb. Normal means the target takes regular damage from that affinity. Weak means the target takes increased damage. The amount of extra damage is controlled by the weakness multiplier in the Calculations tab. Resist means the target takes reduced damage. The reduction is controlled by the resist multiplier in the Calculations tab. Block means the target completely blocks the damage. Repel means the target reflects the attack back to the attacker. Absorb means the target converts the incoming damage into healing. This system allows you to create much more strategic battles. Instead of every enemy reacting the same way to every skill, you can create enemies with unique strengths and weaknesses. This makes the player think more carefully about which skills, items, and party members to use. Now let's add a new affinity. To add a new affinity, click the Add Affinity button. This creates a new empty entry in the affinity list. After adding the entry, type the name of the affinity into the text field. For example, we could create a new affinity called Dark. Dark could be used for shadow magic, curses, demons, ghosts, or other enemy types. The system is flexible, so you can define the affinity list that best fits your own game. The important thing is to think of affinities as the global damage types or reaction categories of your battle system. Adding a new affinity makes it available as data, but it is important to understand one thing. Adding a new affinity does not automatically make skills use it or characters react to it in a specific way. After adding a new affinity, you still need to use it in your content. For example, if you add Dark, you should create skills or items that use the Dark affinity. You should also review your heroes and enemies and decide how they should react to Dark. Now let's look at deleting affinities. Each affinity entry has a delete button. When you click delete, the affinity is removed from the global affinity list. Be careful when deleting affinities that are already used by skills, items, heroes, enemies, or battle logic. If a skill uses fire, but you delete the fire affinity, that skill may no longer behave as expected. The same applies to heroes and enemies. If they were created with reactions to an affinity that no longer exists, you should review their data and update their affinity setup. In general, I recommend setting up your core affinities before creating a large number of heroes, enemies, skills, and items. A good workflow is: first define your core affinity list, then create your skills and items, then create heroes and enemies and decide how they react to those affinities. Then test your battles and adjust weaknesses, resistances, and multipliers. This makes your project much easier to balance. Now let's quickly look at how affinities are used after they are created. When you go to the Create Hero tab, the affinities from the Affinities tab become available for the hero's affinity setup. This allows you to define how each hero reacts to every affinity. For example, a fire mage could resist fire but be weak to ice. A heavily armored warrior could resist physical damage but be weak against electric attacks. The same applies to enemies. When you create enemies, they also use the same global affinity list. This means you can define enemy weaknesses, resistances, blocks, repels, and absorbs directly from the same affinity setup. Skills and items can also use affinities. When you create a skill, you can define which affinity it belongs to. For example, a fireball skill could use the fire affinity. An ice spear skill could use the ice affinity. A sword slash could use the physical affinity. When that skill hits a target, the battle system checks the target's resistance type for that affinity. If the target is weak to that affinity, it takes increased damage. If the target resists it, it takes reduced damage. If the target blocks it, the damage is cancelled. If the target repels it, the attack is reflected. If the target absorbs it, the target is healed instead of damaged. This makes affinities one of the most important tools for creating tactical depth in your battles. The calculation settings also work together with affinities. The weakness multiplier controls how much extra damage a weak reaction causes. The resist multiplier controls how much damage is reduced when the target has a resist reaction. This means you can define your affinity types in the Affinities tab, set individual reactions on heroes and enemies, and then adjust the overall strength of weak and resist reactions in the Calculations tab. In the next tutorials, we will continue with the other tabs of the Ultimate Turn-Based Battle System window and look at how they work together to create complete turn-based RPG battles. Thank you for watching. If this video helped you, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more tutorials and updates about the Ultimate Turn-Based Battle System.